I never thought I would find myself standing at the precipice of my own life, staring into the abyss of betrayal. My name is Daniel, and I was once a man who believed in love, loyalty, and the sanctity of marriage. I had built a life with my wife, Sarah, that I thought was unshakable. We had been together for nearly a decade, and in that time, I had come to know her as my partner, my confidant, and my best friend. But that all changed one fateful evening. It was a typical Thursday night, the kind where the city buzzed with life outside our window while I sat in my home office, buried in spreadsheets and projections. I was the owner of a small but thriving marketing firm, and my business partner, Mark, was my right hand. We had worked tirelessly to build our company from the ground up, and I trusted him implicitly. Little did I know that trust would soon be shattered. As I wrapped up my work, I noticed my phone buzzing incessantly on the desk. It was a message from a mutual friend, someone who had no idea of the storm brewing in my life. "Hey, Dan, you might want to check on Sarah. I saw her with Mark at that new bar downtown. They looked pretty cozy." My heart sank. I felt as if the ground had been pulled from beneath me, leaving me suspended in disbelief. I tried to shake off the feeling, convincing myself that there must be a reasonable explanation. After all, Sarah and Mark had been friends long before I entered the picture. But as I drove to the bar, a sense of dread washed over me. The closer I got, the more my mind raced with possibilities, each one more painful than the last. When I arrived, I hesitated outside the entrance, my heart pounding in my chest. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. The dimly lit bar was filled with laughter and chatter, but all I could focus on was the small table in the corner where I spotted them. Sarah was leaning in, her laughter ringing like music in the air, while Mark sat across from her, his hand resting casually on her arm. The sight was a dagger to my heart, twisting deeper with every passing second. I felt a rush of emotions, anger, betrayal, heartbreak, but most of all, I felt a profound sense of loss. The woman I had loved, the woman I had built my life with, was sharing something intimate with another man. I wanted to confront them, to demand answers, but I was paralyzed by the weight of the moment. Instead, I turned and walked away, my mind racing with thoughts I couldn't articulate. That night, I lay in bed beside Sarah, her soft breathing a stark contrast to the turmoil raging inside me. I stared at the ceiling, replaying the scene in the bar over and over again. How could she do this to me? How could he betray our friendship? The questions gnawed at me, and sleep eluded me as I wrestled with the reality of my situation. In the days that followed, I became a ghost in my own life. I went through the motions of work and home, but my mind was consumed by the betrayal. I watched Sarah as she moved about the house, her laughter echoing in my ears like a cruel reminder of what I had lost. I wanted to confront her, to demand the truth, but fear held me back. What if I was wrong? What if I was just imagining things? The uncertainty was maddening. But deep down, I knew I had to find out the truth. I couldn't let this go without understanding the full extent of her betrayal. I began to observe her more closely, noting the little things, the late nights at work, the secretive phone calls, the way she smiled at her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. Each detail added another layer to the growing mountain of evidence that my heart was desperately trying to deny. As I sat in my office, staring blankly at my computer screen, I felt a shift within me. The pain of betrayal was transforming into something else, an ember of determination. I would uncover the truth, and when I did, I would make them both pay for the heartache they had caused me. The thought of revenge began to take root in my mind, and with it came a sense of clarity. I would not be a victim, I would be the architect of my own fate. The days turned into weeks, and the weight of my discovery pressed heavily on my chest. I had become a man on a mission, driven by a need to uncover the truth behind Sarah's betrayal. Each day, I donned a mask of normalcy, greeting her with a smile while my heart simmered with resentment and confusion. I was a stranger in my own home, and the woman I once adored was now a source of torment. I began my investigation quietly, gathering evidence like a detective piecing together a case. I started by tracking Sarah's movements, noting the times she left for work and when she returned. I even took to following her on occasion, my heart racing with each step I took. I felt like a voyeur in my own life, but I needed to know. I needed to see for myself the truth that had been gnawing at my insides. One evening, I decided to confront my fears head-on. I had learned that Sarah was meeting Mark for drinks after work, and I couldn't resist the urge to see it for myself. I parked a few blocks away from the bar, my heart pounding as I approached the entrance. The familiar sounds of laughter and clinking glasses filled the air, but all I could focus on was the sight of my wife and my business partner together. As I peered through the window, I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. They were seated at the same table where I had first seen them, and this time, there was no mistaking the chemistry between them. Sarah leaned in closer to Mark, her hand brushing against his as they shared a private joke. I felt the world tilt beneath me, and I stumbled back, my breath hitching in my throat. The betrayal was no longer a whisper, it was a deafening roar. I returned home that night, my mind racing with thoughts of revenge. I had to confront Sarah, but I wanted to gather more evidence first. I needed to be sure that what I suspected was true. I began to dig deeper, searching through her phone when she left it unattended, scrolling through messages that made my blood boil. Flirtatious exchanges, inside jokes, and plans to meet up, all of it laid bare before me like a grotesque tapestry of deceit. Each message was a dagger, each laugh a reminder of the love I thought we shared. I felt like a puppet with its strings cut, flailing in a world that had turned upside down. I wanted to scream, to confront her, but I held back. I needed to be strategic. I needed to plan my next move carefully. As the days passed, I found myself consumed by thoughts of revenge. I began to formulate a plan, one that would not only expose Sarah's infidelity but also dismantle the life Mark had built alongside mine. I envisioned a scenario where both of them would face the consequences of their actions, where their betrayal would be laid bare for all to see. The thought of it sent a thrill through me, a dark satisfaction that I hadn't felt in weeks. I started to gather information about Mark, digging into his personal life and business dealings. I discovered that he had been struggling financially, his investments faltering as our company faced increasing competition. It was a weakness I could exploit, a chink in his armor that I could use to my advantage. The more I learned, the more my plan took shape. I began to reach out to contacts in the industry, planting seeds of doubt about Mark's capabilities as a partner. I whispered rumors of his financial troubles, hinting at his questionable decisions. I watched as the whispers spread, like wildfire consuming everything in its path. It felt good to take control, to turn the tables on the man who had betrayed me. But as I plotted my revenge, I couldn't shake the feeling of guilt that crept in. Was I becoming the very thing I despised? I wrestled with my conscience, torn between the desire for retribution and the remnants of love I still felt for Sarah. I remembered the moments we had shared, the laughter, the dreams, the promises. But those memories were overshadowed by the reality of her betrayal, and I knew I had to push through the guilt. One night, as I lay in bed beside her, I watched her sleep, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the moonlight. I felt a pang of longing, a desire to reach out and hold her close. But the image of her with Mark flashed in my mind, and the longing turned to rage. I had to remind myself of the truth, she had chosen him over me. She had shattered the trust we had built, and now it was time for her to face the consequences. The emotional conflict raged within me, but I steeled myself for what was to come. I would not be a victim any longer. I would take back my power, and I would make them both pay for the pain they had caused me. The plan was taking shape, and with each passing day, I felt more resolute in my decision. I was ready to execute my revenge, and nothing would stand in my way. The days turned into a blur of planning and plotting, each moment consumed by thoughts of how to execute my revenge. I had gathered enough evidence to confirm my worst fears, and now it was time to turn that pain into action. I felt like a chess player, carefully considering each move, anticipating the reactions of my opponents. The thrill of strategizing my revenge was intoxicating, and I found myself relishing the idea of dismantling the lives of those who had betrayed me. I began by solidifying my connections within the industry. I reached out to old contacts, people I hadn't spoken to in years, and subtly dropped hints about Mark's financial troubles. I painted a picture of a man who was struggling to keep his head above water, a partner who was more of a liability than an asset. The whispers I spread were like poison, slowly seeping into the minds of those who had once respected him. I could see the seeds of doubt taking root, and it filled me with a sense of satisfaction. But my plan didn't stop there. I knew I had to confront Sarah, to expose her betrayal in a way that would leave no room for denial. I wanted her to feel the weight of her actions, to understand the pain she had caused me. I envisioned a confrontation that would shatter her world, just as she had shattered mine. The thought of it sent a thrill through me, a dark satisfaction that I hadn't felt in weeks. I decided to set the stage for our confrontation. I planned a dinner at our favorite restaurant, a place that held memories of happier times. I wanted to lure her into a false sense of security, to make her believe that everything was fine. As I made the reservations, I felt a mix of excitement and dread. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment when I would finally reveal the truth. The night of the dinner arrived, and I dressed carefully, choosing a suit that made me feel confident and powerful. I arrived at the restaurant early, my heart racing with anticipation. I ordered a bottle of her favorite wine, the same one we had shared on our first date. As I waited for her to arrive, I rehearsed the words I would say, the way I would confront her with the evidence of her betrayal. When Sarah walked in, she looked radiant, her smile lighting up the room. I felt a pang of longing, a desire to reach out and hold her close. But I quickly reminded myself of the truth: she had chosen Mark over me. I steeled my resolve as she approached the table, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Daniel. I'm so glad we're doing this," she said, leaning in to kiss me on the cheek. I forced a smile, my heart heavy with the weight of what was to come. We chatted about mundane topics, the weather, work, and our plans for the weekend. I played the part of the loving husband, all the while feeling the tension building inside me. I could see the flicker of confusion in her eyes as I remained unusually quiet, my mind racing with thoughts of how to reveal the truth. Finally, after a few glasses of wine, I decided it was time. I leaned in closer, my voice low and steady. "Sarah, there's something we need to talk about." Her expression shifted, a hint of concern crossing her face. "What is it, Daniel?" "You're scaring me." I took a deep breath, my heart pounding in my chest. "I know about you and Mark." The words hung in the air like a heavy fog, and I watched as her face paled. "What do you mean?" she stammered, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. "I saw you with him. I've seen the messages." "I know everything," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "You've betrayed me, Sarah. You've betrayed our marriage." Her eyes widened in shock, and for a moment, I thought she might deny it. But then the truth washed over her, and I could see the realization sinking in. "Daniel, Save it," I interrupted, my voice rising. "I don't want to hear your excuses. You've made your choice, and now you'll have to live with the consequences." The restaurant felt like it was closing in on us, the laughter and chatter of other diners fading into the background. I could see the tears welling in her eyes, but I felt no sympathy. I had spent too long wallowing in pain. It was time for her to feel the weight of her actions. "I can't believe you would do this to me," I continued, my voice cold. "You've shattered everything we built together." "And for what? A fling with my business partner?" Her face crumpled, and I could see the guilt etched across her features. "I'm so sorry, Daniel. I never meant for it to happen. It was a mistake." "A mistake?" I echoed, my voice rising again. "This isn't just a mistake, Sarah. This is a betrayal of everything we stood for. You've destroyed our trust, and now I'm going to make sure you understand the consequences." As I spoke, I could see the realization dawning on her. She was beginning to understand that I was no longer the man she had known. I was a man transformed by betrayal, a man who would stop at nothing to reclaim his power. The confrontation was just the beginning. I had set my plan in motion, and now it was time to watch it unfold. I would ensure that both Sarah and Mark faced the consequences of their actions, and I would do it with the precision of a surgeon, cutting away the cancer that had invaded my life. The confrontation with Sarah had been cathartic, a release of pent-up emotions that had been festering inside me for weeks. But it was only the beginning. Now that I had exposed her betrayal, it was time to turn my attention to Mark. I had spent enough time gathering information and plotting my revenge. It was time to execute the plan I had meticulously crafted. I knew that Mark's financial struggles were a vulnerability I could exploit. I had already begun to plant seeds of doubt about his capabilities as a partner, but now I needed to take it a step further. I decided to leverage my connections in the industry to orchestrate a series of events that would lead to his downfall. The first step was to arrange a meeting with our investors. I had been working on a presentation that highlighted the strengths of our company, but I decided to twist it to my advantage. I would present Mark's recent decisions as reckless and detrimental to our growth. I gathered data, charts, and projections that painted a bleak picture of our future under his leadership. I wanted to ensure that the investors saw him as a liability, someone who could jeopardize their investments. As the day of the meeting approached, I felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. I had rehearsed my presentation countless times, refining my arguments and anticipating questions. I wanted to come across as confident and knowledgeable, a leader who had the company's best interests at heart. I knew that if I could sway the investors, it would send a clear message to Mark that his time was running out. The meeting was held in a sleek conference room, the walls adorned with glass and steel, a testament to our company's success. As the investors filed in, I felt a surge of adrenaline. I greeted them with a smile, but inside, I was a storm of emotions. I was about to unleash my plan, and I couldn't afford to show any weakness. Once everyone was seated, I launched into my presentation. I spoke passionately about our company's vision, highlighting our achievements and the potential for growth. But then I shifted gears, presenting the data that illustrated Mark's poor decision-making. I could see the investors' expressions change as I laid out the facts, their brows furrowing in concern. While we have seen success in many areas, it's important to address the recent challenges we've faced, I said, my voice steady. Under Mark's leadership, we've made several investments that have not yielded the expected returns. This has put our financial stability at risk. I watched as the investors exchanged glances, their unease palpable. I continued to build my case, emphasizing the need for a reevaluation of our leadership structure. I could feel the momentum shifting in my favor, and it fueled my determination. As I concluded my presentation, I opened the floor for questions. The investors were hesitant at first, but soon they began to voice their concerns. I answered each question with confidence, reinforcing my position and painting Mark as a liability. I could see the doubt creeping into their minds, and it filled me with a sense of triumph. After the meeting, I received a flurry of messages from the investors, expressing their concerns about Mark's leadership. I knew I had struck a nerve, and it was only a matter of time before the fallout began. I felt a rush of exhilaration, knowing that I was one step closer to dismantling the life Mark had built alongside mine. But I wasn't done yet. I needed to ensure that Mark felt the full weight of his actions. I decided to confront him directly, to let him know that I was aware of his betrayal and that I would not allow him to escape unscathed. I arranged to meet him at a local bar, a place where we had shared many laughs and drinks over the years. It felt fitting to confront him in a place that held so many memories. When I arrived, I found Mark seated at the bar, a drink in hand. He looked up as I approached, a smile spreading across his face. "Daniel. Good to see you, man. How's everything going?" I forced a smile, my heart racing with anticipation. "We need to talk, Mark." His expression shifted, a flicker of concern crossing his face. "Sure, what's up?" I took a seat beside him, my mind racing with the words I wanted to say. "I know about you and Sarah." The words hung in the air, and I watched as his smile faded. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice suddenly tense. "I saw you together. I've seen the messages." "You've betrayed me, Mark," I said, my voice low and steady. "And now, I'm going to make sure you pay for it." He opened his mouth to respond, but I cut him off. "You think you can just waltz into my life and take what's mine?" You've made a grave mistake, and I won't let you get away with it. Mark's eyes narrowed, and I could see the realization dawning on him. What are you talking about? I leaned in closer, my voice barely above a whisper. I've already begun to expose your incompetence to our investors. They're starting to question your leadership, and soon enough, they'll see you for what you really are, a liability. His face paled, and I could see the panic rising within him. You wouldn't do that, he said, his voice trembling. Oh, but I already have, I replied, a sense of satisfaction washing over me. You've underestimated me, Mark. You thought you could take everything from me without consequences. But now, it's your turn to face the music. I stood up, leaving him to grapple with the reality of his situation. As I walked away, I felt a surge of power coursing through me. I had taken control of my life, and I was no longer a victim. I was the architect of my own revenge, and I would see it through to the end. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. I continued to spread rumors about Mark, ensuring that his reputation was tarnished beyond repair. I watched as the investors began to distance themselves from him, their confidence in his leadership eroding with each passing day. It was a beautiful sight, and I reveled in the knowledge that I was the one orchestrating his downfall. But as I executed my plan, I couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness that lingered beneath the surface. I had taken control, but at what cost? I was becoming the very thing I despised, a man consumed by revenge. I had to remind myself that this was about reclaiming my power, about making them both pay for the pain they had caused me. As I lay in bed at night, I found myself wrestling with the morality of my actions. Was I justified in seeking revenge? Or was I simply perpetuating a cycle of pain? I knew I had to stay focused on my goal, but the questions haunted me, a constant reminder of the darkness I was embracing. The fallout from my actions began to unfold like a carefully orchestrated play, each scene more dramatic than the last. I had set the wheels of revenge in motion, and now I was watching as Mark's world crumbled around him. The investors, once supportive of him, were now questioning his every decision. Rumors swirled like a tempest, and I reveled in the chaos I had created. It was a Friday afternoon when I received the call that would change everything. I was sitting in my office, reviewing some marketing strategies, when my phone buzzed with an incoming message. It was from one of the investors, a man I had been in contact with throughout this ordeal. Daniel, we need to talk. Can you meet me at the office? My heart raced as I read the message. I had anticipated this moment, but now that it was here, I felt a mix of excitement and dread. I knew that the investors were beginning to lose faith in Mark, but I hadn't expected them to reach out to me directly. I quickly gathered my things and headed to their office, my mind racing with possibilities. When I arrived, I was ushered into a conference room where several investors were already seated. Their expressions were serious, and I could sense the tension in the air. "Thank you for coming, Daniel," one of them said, his voice grave. "We've been discussing the future of the company, and we need your input." I took a seat, my heart pounding in my chest. "Of course. What's on your mind?" The lead investor leaned forward, his hands clasped together. "We've been concerned about Mark's leadership. There have been several troubling reports about his recent decisions, and we're starting to question whether he's the right person to lead us moving forward." I felt a surge of satisfaction at his words, but I kept my expression neutral. "I understand your concerns. I've noticed some troubling trends as well." The conversation continued, and I found myself in a position of power. I was no longer the victim, I was the one shaping the narrative. I spoke candidly about Mark's shortcomings, reinforcing the doubts that had already begun to fester among the investors. I could see their resolve hardening, and it filled me with a sense of triumph. As the meeting concluded, the investors expressed their gratitude for my insights. "We'll be making some decisions in the coming days," one of them said. "Thank you for your honesty, Daniel. We appreciate your commitment to the company." I left the office feeling exhilarated, but as I walked to my car, a sense of unease began to creep in. I had orchestrated Mark's downfall, but at what cost? I had become a puppet master, pulling strings and manipulating lives, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing a part of myself in the process. That evening, I returned home to find Sarah waiting for me. She looked anxious, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for answers. "Daniel, we need to talk," she said, her voice trembling. I felt a wave of irritation wash over me. "What is there to talk about, Sarah? You've made your choice." "I know I messed up," she said, her voice breaking. "But I want to make things right. I want to fix this." I crossed my arms, my heart hardened by the betrayal. "You think you can just waltz back into my life and pretend everything is fine? You've shattered my trust, and now you want me to forgive you?" Tears welled in her eyes, and I felt a flicker of guilt. But I quickly pushed it aside. "You've chosen Mark over me. You've betrayed our marriage, and now you want to act like it never happened? Please, Daniel," she pleaded. "I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. I was confused, and I made a terrible mistake." I shook my head, my resolve hardening. "You don't get to play the victim here, Sarah. You made your choice, and now you'll have to live with the consequences." As I spoke, I could see the realization dawning on her. She understood that I was no longer the man she had married. I was a man transformed by betrayal, a man who would stop at nothing to reclaim his power. The following days were filled with tension as Mark's situation worsened. The investors began to distance themselves from him, and I watched as he struggled to maintain control. I felt a sense of satisfaction at his downfall, but it was tinged with an unsettling emptiness. I had achieved my goal, but the victory felt hollow. One evening, I received a call from one of the investors. "Daniel, we need to discuss Mark's future with the company. We're considering a vote of no confidence." My heart raced at the news. This was the moment I had been waiting for. "I understand. I'll be there." When I arrived at the meeting, the atmosphere was charged with tension. The investors were gathered around the table, their expressions serious. I took a seat, my heart pounding in my chest as the discussion began. "We've seen enough evidence to question Mark's leadership," one of the investors said. "It's time we take action." As the conversation unfolded, I felt a surge of power. I was no longer a victim, I was the one shaping the narrative. I spoke passionately about the need for change, reinforcing the doubts that had already begun to fester among the investors. I could see their resolve hardening, and it filled me with a sense of triumph. Finally, the vote was called. As the results were announced, I felt a rush of exhilaration. Mark had been ousted from the company, his reputation in tatters. I had achieved my goal, but as I looked around the room, I couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness that lingered beneath the surface. That night, I returned home, my heart heavy with the weight of my actions. I had taken control, but at what cost? I had become the very thing I despised, a man consumed by revenge. I had to remind myself that this was about reclaiming my power, about making them both pay for the pain they had caused me. As I lay in bed, I found myself wrestling with the morality of my actions. Was I justified in seeking revenge? Or was I simply perpetuating a cycle of pain? I knew I had to stay focused on my goal, but the questions haunted me, a constant reminder of the darkness I was embracing. The aftermath of my revenge unfolded like a slow-motion train wreck. Mark was out of the company, his reputation in ruins, and the investors were rallying around me as the new face of leadership. I had achieved what I set out to do, but the victory felt bittersweet. I had taken back my power, but at what cost? The thrill of revenge had faded, leaving behind a hollow emptiness that gnawed at my insides. As I settled into my new role, I found myself grappling with the consequences of my actions. The office was abuzz with whispers about Mark's downfall, and while I had initially reveled in the attention, I soon realized that the excitement was fleeting. I had become a figure of intrigue, but I was also a man haunted by the ghosts of my past. Sarah had retreated into herself, her attempts to reach out to me met with cold indifference. I could see the pain in her eyes, but I felt no sympathy. She had made her choice, and now she was living with the consequences. I had exposed her betrayal, and while it had brought me a sense of satisfaction, it had also created a chasm between us that felt insurmountable. One evening, as I sat in my office, I received a message from Sarah. "Can we talk? I need to explain myself." My heart raced at the thought of confronting her again. Part of me wanted to hear her out, to understand her perspective, but another part of me was still consumed by anger and betrayal. I hesitated before responding, but ultimately, I agreed to meet her. We chose a small cafe, a neutral ground where we could talk without the weight of our past hanging over us. As I arrived, I felt a mix of anticipation and dread. I had spent so long plotting my revenge that I had almost forgotten what it felt like to simply be with her. When Sarah walked in, she looked different, more fragile, as if the weight of her actions had taken a toll on her. She approached me cautiously, her eyes searching mine for any sign of forgiveness. "Thank you for meeting me," she said softly. I nodded, my heart heavy with the memories of what we once had. "What do you want to say?" "I know I hurt you, Daniel. I can't express how sorry I am for what I did," she began, her voice trembling. "I was confused and made a terrible mistake. But I want you to know that it meant nothing to me. You're the one I love." Her words hung in the air, and I felt a flicker of something, longing, perhaps, or maybe just the remnants of the love I once felt for her. But I quickly pushed it aside. "You made your choice, Sarah. You chose him over me." "I know," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "But I want to make things right. I want to rebuild what we had." I shook my head, my heart aching at the thought. "Can we really go back to what we had? You shattered my trust, and I don't know if I can ever forgive you." "I understand," she replied, her voice breaking. "But I'm willing to fight for us. I'll do whatever it takes to prove to you that I'm committed to making this work." As I looked into her eyes, I saw the sincerity in her expression, but I also felt the weight of my own pain. I had spent so long plotting my revenge that I had forgotten what it felt like to love and be loved. The darkness I had embraced had consumed me, and I was left grappling with the remnants of my former self. "I don't know if I can trust you again," I admitted, my voice heavy with emotion. "You've hurt me in ways I can't even begin to describe." "I know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm willing to do the work. I want to show you that I can be the partner you deserve." As we sat in that cafe, I felt a flicker of hope amidst the pain. Perhaps there was a way forward, a path that could lead us back to each other. But it would take time, effort, and a willingness to confront the darkness that had threatened to consume us both. In the weeks that followed, we began to navigate the treacherous waters of rebuilding our relationship. It wasn't easy. Trust is a fragile thing, easily shattered and difficult to restore. We attended couples therapy, where we confronted the issues that had led to her infidelity and my subsequent quest for revenge. It was a painful process, but it was also cathartic. I found myself reflecting on the choices I had made, the darkness I had embraced in my pursuit of revenge. I realized that while I had taken back my power, I had also lost a part of myself in the process. I had become a man consumed by anger, and it had cost me dearly. As I worked to rebuild my relationship with Sarah, I also began to focus on my own healing. I sought out new hobbies, reconnected with old friends, and found solace in the things that had once brought me joy. I learned to let go of the anger that had fueled my revenge, and in doing so, I began to rediscover the man I had once been. The road to healing was long and fraught with challenges, but I was determined to move forward. I had learned that revenge may provide a fleeting sense of satisfaction, but it ultimately leads to emptiness. True power lies not in seeking vengeance, but in finding the strength to forgive and rebuild. As I sat with Sarah one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. We had a long way to go, but we were committed to the journey. I had learned that love is not just about trust, it's about resilience, forgiveness, and the willingness to confront the darkness together. In that moment, I realized that while betrayal had shattered my world, it had also opened the door to a new beginning. I was no longer the man consumed by revenge, I was a man willing to embrace the complexities of love and trust. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, I felt a renewed sense of hope for the future.